All right, welcome everybody. So I'll go ahead and I'll start introducing myself. My name is Brittany Lake. I'm the program coordinator for Detroit Bird Alliance. We try to offer webinars a handful of times each year, but this presentation today, I wanted to introduce Andy will be our presenter. So Andy, feel free to take over.
Thank you, Brittany, for this opportunity. It was so great many months ago when I first emailed Brittany about doing these types of engagements with the Detroit Bird Alliance. She was so ready to throw me in with all these really fun things that she's put on the schedule. So thank you, Brittany. Thanks to the Detroit Bird Alliance. It's a great organization. Everyone go check them out. So let's officially get started here, everybody.
You know I'm birding, baby. Bird song. Where my binoculars at? Bird song. I'm with the trees. Bird song. I'm looking for birds, yo. Bird song.
So welcome. This is a talk about bird song and music. And I'd like to start today by grounding us all with a quote. So this is J. Drew Lanham. He's an ornithologist and a MacArthur Fellow back in 2022. And he said this: "We are all part and parcel of nature, parakeets and people alike. How we treat one another determines who we all are or might become."
You know what?
So this is me. Hi. Hello, everyone. My name is Andy Jarema. I live in Southeast Michigan. I grew up there my whole life. I currently live in Clawson, Michigan, tiny city near Detroit area, if anyone knows. I'm a music teacher and composer. I taught for quite a while in the public schools as a music teacher, everything from kindergarten music to middle school band classes. I was an artist in residence with 2 national parks, which were phenomenal programs. They basically said, hey, come live in the park for a month, explore, create, do what you want as an artist. And those opportunities in 2018 and 2019 set me on the path to think of the natural world and it interacting with my musicianship. And currently, I'm a virtual music teacher. I literally teach kids all around the world. Here they all are. They are across 4 different time zones. And the niche I've sort of found for a lot of these students is they really like video game music. It's sort of the fun niche I found as a teacher online in the virtual space to teach. And so I see all 17 of my kids once a week for private lessons with music. And so basically from the comfort of my couch, I get to talk about Mario and Minecraft. It's a dream. It's amazing. So you're probably wondering, though, what a musician is doing here talking about birds. 2 answers to that question. The first is that I've spent my career as a music teacher describing sound. It's what I do all of the time. And I feel like that gives me a unique skill set to talk about bird song. And I hope to offer you that skill set today. But the other reason is, you know, I'm sitting here in my house in Clawson and looking up towards my ceiling and imagining the remnants of Hurricane Beryl sort of creeping over us here in Michigan. And it's about to drop like flood level amounts of rain potentially tomorrow. You know, this is a storm that formed on July 1st in the Atlantic Ocean and was the earliest Category 5 hurricane in the Atlantic ever, like since we've been keeping records. And that storm is directly attributable to climate change. That horrifies me. And I'm just horrified by our relationship with the planet and how that sort of started to fray and cause these cascading biodiversity crises, whether it's climate change or pandemics or loss of habitat that's affecting both us and the birds and every living creature. And so I'm a teacher. I can teach. that's in my skill set. And so I want to do, as one thing I can do, I should say, one thing I can do is talk about the natural worlds. And so hopefully sort of start to rekindle that relationship. And that, again, takes me back to the quote I read at the beginning of the presentation here. I think we have a lot of opportunity and a lot of time to think of what world do we want to imagine? What do we want to become, as Mr. Lanham says here. So that's what drives me. That's what's doming this entire conversation we're going to have today, even though it's not the topic at hand. It's behind everything I'm saying. So we have quite a bit to get through today, and we're going to try and get through all of it. We have birthing by ear to begin with. I'm going to teach you how my ears as a musician hear bird song and offer that to you. Whether they're birds, how do they sing, bird songs and composers. And then we're also going to intersperse today with some time for questions and some quizzes. So if you have questions, save them for those moments. They'll be very clear when they happen in the presentation. You're going to see a big red-winged blackbird demanding questions from you. Put them in the chat, and then Brittany's going to help me sift through them, and we're going to get them answered for you. And then we're also going to do some quizzes. I'm going to start testing your knowledge that you're going to learn in this first segment here. Okay. So having said that, everybody, let's begin with birding by ear. So some of you on the Zoom call today might know exactly what you're hearing here. Others of you are probably listening and going, yep, that's a bird, right? Because we're accustomed to seeing birds, but when it comes to listening to them, I think we kind of tune that sense out sometimes and it becomes a bit invisible, I guess. And so what happens is listening to birds becomes like this white noise. It's very impenetrable and hard to figure out what you're hearing. But if you really start listening in detail, you can actually hear that, for example, you're listening to 4 different bird calls there. And so starting to untangle that puzzle kind of reminds me of the first time I heard a symphony orchestra. And I heard all the musicians on stage as one massive ball of sound. I had no idea what was happening. But then someone pointed out, well, hey, there are the woodwinds. There's the brass. There's the strings. There's the percussion. And slowly I began to understand and pick apart what I was hearing. Same thing within rap and hip hop music. You need someone to explain to you, hey, here's the beat. This is what it sounds like. There's a kick drum, a snare drum, and some hi-hats. That's how the beat is constructed. And again, the puzzle starts to unlock. And once it starts to unlock for birdsong, that gets fun because you can step outside your door and like in the peak of spring, I can step out and hear 5 different bird calls in 30 seconds. And I know that those creatures are flowing around me, and yet I can't see them. And so it's almost like this extra sensory perception I had that I know these creatures around me and I've identified them, but I can't even see them, right? So it's a really fun skill to have, birding by ear, trying to pick out all these birds around you by sound. But the question is, where do we begin with that? Because again, the white noise, like it all sounds like one giant bird out there at first. I think it's best to start small. Start with one bird you know, and I chose our lovely state bird here, the American robin. So what I'm going to have us all do here in the chat is we're going to try and describe this robin's call. I'm going to play you a sound recording of the robin, and I want you to go into detail with me. Explain that sound the best you can. And what that's going to do for us is give us what I call an anchor bird, meaning when you go outside, hopefully after this presentation, you will know this sound, even if you don't know anything else happening out there. So this will be our anchor to all the other bird song that comes after. And just to give you a few prompts to help you with this question of describe the sound of this robin, imagery. What pops into your head? What sort of picture or even like movie is playing in your head as you're listening to this bird? Onomatopoeia. What does it sound like? If you could sing back to this bird, what would the syllables sound like? Or come up with a cheeky nickname. I know I've got plenty for my furry friends that I dig into. Something goofy, something zany, something the sound reminds you of. Or feel free to use these terms on the left. I'm going to get a little bit more into those after you answer. These are more musical terms, and I'm going to kind of graft my knowledge onto our collective knowledge we're going to put in the chat. So having said all that, use the chat. Tell me how you would describe the sound of this robin. As the answers start flowing in, I'll play it a couple more times to give you time and give you more listens. So feel free to keep adding in your answers to my mom and dad. Hi again, they're here, and they gave the first answers here. Peter Piper, that makes me think of timbre, which is the term on the upper left here on my screen. What instrument does it sound like? Because Peter Piper plays a flute, right? So perhaps we could say it's kind of like a flute. My dad, hi dad. He said a loose fan belt. As you can tell, he's very mechanically inclined. And that kind of gets into the rhythm of this bird. It has like a regular repeating rhythm, kind of like a fan belt might have, right? Cindy says stridently, musically repeated three-word phrase. I really like stridently. That kind of is a very like emotional sort of word for me. It kind of conveys the emotion of the bird, right? And three-word phrase. That also kind of fits into rhythm. Phrasing and rhythm are kind of related. That's a great answer. Martha says, sounds conversational. Statement, then a question. Absolutely. And we're going to get into the balance between repetition and novelty in a second. We'll get more into detail with that, Martha. Over here, over here, over here. Great onomatopoeia there. I really like that one. Of course, if you go on the Audubon's website, they have cheer up cheerily. That's like the most common one. It's in several bird books too. Melanie says elegance and soft. There is a really just pleasing quality to this one, right? Unlike some birds we're going to listen to. And yes, Kathy. Oh, hi, Kathy. Kathy and I used to teach together. I think that's Kathy there. Hi, Kathy. Agree with the question. Pitch goes up at the end. Oh yeah, that's Kathy. Hi. Yeah, there is sort of like this question mark, sort of like an unresolved musical phrase. Kind of, did something like da 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 da, and didn't finish that, right? So it's kind of like this question mark at the end. And then over here, this answer says, come here, deep loud, hey you, come here. That's some really lovely onomatopoeia there. I really love that one. Oh, that's really great because you're getting into the different sounds it's using. It's not all uniform, right? So I'll look at this last answer here. Definitely a question mark at the end, right? So now let me graph some information onto what you all are saying, which by the way is fantastic so far. Timbre, the sound of the instrument. I always like to think of that as a musician. I hear a flute or a whistle. It's a very pure sound. It's not buzzy like a trumpet or a brass instrument or like a distorted guitar. It's very pure, like a flute or again, whistle. The pitch really moves up and down on this bird, as we're about to see in the next video I'm going to show you. And the rhythm, again, is very regular. Like there's sort of this like chut, 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 with kind of breaks in between too, right? So just to kind of put that all into perspective for all of you, this is kind of what I literally see when I am hearing this bird. There's almost like, imagine like a ticker tape scrolling across my eyes. And this is what I sort of imagine and what helps me really lock into what this bird is doing. I try and envision this as I'm listening. So for those of you who aren't familiar, this is a spectrogram. You have time running left to right and pitch running up and down, or frequency. And so you can see with this bird, this robin here, the pitch is wildly jumping up and down, lots of swoops and sort of up and down motions like a roller coaster, which is not the case with every bird, right? So this sort of swooping motion is not unique to the robin, but it definitely is a characteristic that makes it special. But in addition to the spectrogram, I also see it this way. Let me try that one more time. So as a musician, again, that's sort of what I see. And that skill sort of helps me see and hear some details that I wouldn't otherwise notice, even in the spectrogram. For example, we have a major chord here. This is something that we can play on a piano or with a guitar. You know, when pop musicians use chords, a lot of them are major chords. And so we think, robins and most birds are very musical. They literally are. Like they're borrowing from the same sort of information that musicians do, which is amazing, right? And there's also repetition going on. It repeats that phrase 2 more times while also taking this other phrase from the beginning and repeating that another time. So it's sort of juggling these phrases and bringing them back and repeating them, while also bringing us novelty. That box in the green shows a new idea that it's introducing. And that to me is like a composer. Because when a composer or songwriter writes a song or a piece of music, that's how they're thinking. They're thinking in terms of these, when should I bring this motive back? Or when should I, move on to the next idea, move into something new, right? So hopefully that gives you another layer of insight you can add to what all of you put in the chat. That's what I sort of notice as a musician when I am listening to a bird, this ticker tape and these ways that they repeat things and don't repeat things and how it sounds musical or perhaps not. Like some birds don't sing in these chords, right? So that was our foray into the robin. And so what I want you to do now is take something from the last 5 or 10 minutes and hold on to it. That's kind of like your sonic totem that I want you to hold on to, because you will be quizzed later and this will come in handy. So remember that sound of the robin and pick your favorite method of remembering it, whether it's Peter Piper or whether it's the question mark bird, right? I'm going to take a break for a second here and leave the chat open for questions. If anyone wants to drop a question in the chat, feel free right now. Otherwise, in about a minute, I will continue on into our next topic.
So our first question is from Martha. Thank you, Martha. Do all robins sing in the same pitch?
Excellent question. From what I understand, no. I do notice that a lot of robins I hear in my neighborhood kind of center around the note G flat and E flat. But I've listened to recordings from other places and they sound wildly different. So it really depends on the region. Birds have different dialects, and scientists have sort of studied this. It's really cool to look into these studies where they talk about dialects of birds, a mile apart. They have different dialects even. So no, they don't all sing on the same pitch. But what I do notice again is they sometimes hover on the same key, like this G flat in my neighborhood, and all robins have a sort of motif they come back to themselves. So for example, I've gotten to know this bird in my neighborhood that goes da 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 da, and I know that robin when I hear it because only that robin does that motif, for example. So again, not all on the same pitch, really varies with what they can do. Good question, Martha. All right. So if you have another question, feel free to put it in the chat. We'll get it on the next go rounds. There'll be 2 other opportunities to ask questions. For now, I think it's time we talk about some science here. So first, a basic question. What are birds, right? They are dinosaurs, which is so cool. Maybe some of us knew that already, but it never gets old that they are dinosaurs, right? And they evolved from this bird, the Archaeopteryx. The Archaeopteryx had feathers, wings, but it was also small. And from that small stature is how the evolutionary arm of birds sort of emerged from the dinosaurs. And about 60 million years ago, the songbirds started to evolve. So out of the 10,000 bird species on the planet, about just under half of those are what we call songbirds. It's the scientific order Passerii or Oscine. Both of those names are applicable. And again, in Australia and its surrounding islands is when these birds started to evolve 60 million years ago. And they're not the only songsters in nature in the avian kingdom, but they're, I would say, the most famous and well-known songsters. They're well known for their singing abilities. So that's just a quick primer on what are birds and sort of what are we talking about today exactly. So now we can go on to answer this question. How do birds sing? But before we can answer that question, we should talk about how we sing first. So what I want you all to do with me is find your larynx. You're going to take your hands, put it underneath your chin here, sort of at the top of your throat, top of your windpipe. Stay muted. Don't need to turn on your mics for this. What I want you to do is hum something with me. Again, your hands are about right here on the top of your throat and just hum. You should be feeling a vibration right now. And if you're not, kind of move your hand around, see if you can find it in a different, slightly location, slightly different. But what you're feeling right there, that vibration, that's your larynx. Those are muscles the size of a penny in the shape of a V at the top of your trachea. And they literally are chopping the air. These muscles are chopping the air to create all the things that we can do with our voice: singing, speaking, whistling, humming, etc. Well, not whistling, actually, kind of different there, but it does everything that we can do with our voice. Pretty incredible when you think about it. These tiny little muscles and how versatile they are, right? But we've got nothing on the birds, everybody, because they, in addition to having a larynx, have a syrinx. And this is the secret weapon of the birding kingdom. because it's at the bottom of their trachea, the bottom of their windpipe. And because of that, there's a branch for each lung. So sit with this with me, okay? They can sing two things at the same time. Let that sink in. Two things at the same time, one set of vocalizing muscles for each lung. And not only that, they're lightning fast, 100 times faster than we can blink our eyes. So to demonstrate this, we can listen to our friend the robin again. I'm just going to isolate one tiny chirp that this robin does here. And listen to how this just sounds like one chirp. I'll play it one more time here. That's just one robin chirp, right? Until we slow it down. So I'm going to take that recording now and slow it down gradually in time, more and more and more. And you're actually going to hear more notes sort of emerge from its song. Take a listen. So by my count, that's actually 4 notes, right? But they just go by so lightning quick that we all hear it as one. That's the speed of the syrinx in action. But then we also have that dual nature, that dual operating system, right? So we have this cardinal here. And first I'll play the recording at normal speed, then we'll slow it down like the robin. And what you're going to hear when I slow down this cardinal song is a ping-ponging effect. Woo-doo, 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 because what it's doing is it's using opposite sides of its syrinx, one for the lower pitches, and then the other to finish off the higher pitches. So listen to the normal recording first, and you're probably not going to be able to hear that in the normal recording. But now listen to when I slow it down, you're going to hear this ping pong effect. And again, that's the two sides of the syrinx. Remarkable, right? So again, this is the powerhouse organ that enables birds to do all of their incredible vocalizing. It's fast and it's dual-sided, so it gives it a range of singing abilities, right? And now to sort of put this all together into one bird, the speed and the sort of two-sided nature of their organs there, we got to talk about this hermit thrush, which I mentioned in the beginning of this presentation. I love listening up at my parents' place here in up North Michigan because they are so incredibly dense and musical. So just to give you your ears something to wrap around, I'm just going to play this short clip of a hermit thrush so you can kind of hear what they sound like. So this is a hermit thrush here. But now what we're going to do is take that same song and slow it down again and really listen deeply here with me for this next minute. You're going to hear two things happening at once. If you listen really carefully, this counterpoint, we call it in music, two things sort of going with and against each other. And also, the more we slow it down, the more appreciation you're going to gain for its speed. So take a listen to this. This is the hermit thrush song, progressively getting slower so you can hear more details. Sit back and listen with me. again, all contained within that amount of time. So it's not even fair how they can do this amount of singing and this musicking, right? Um, so again, that's part of the reason why birds are so musical and how they actually sing. Now, to graft another concept on top of their vocalizing muscles, their syrinx, is their brains. So this is the sort of secondary secret weapon that birds have, because birds, like us, are vocal learners, meaning they can hear a sound in nature, interpret that sound, and then sort of recreate a response to that using their vocalizing muscles. Not a lot of animals can do this. You can see on the screen here, dolphins, bats, sea lions, whales, I think also elephants, and us. That's about it. And so it's a very special ability to have this. And birds, along with that syrinx, can utilize their brains to interpret and reproduce vocalizations. And there's some remarkable studies out there by scientists who have looked at our brains and bird brains, and they've looked at how we process language in our brains, and they see the same brain centers in birds too. I think it's like 6 out of 7 are like overlaps. So that potentially means that birds treat sound as a language like we do, which just shows you the depth that this goes. And so to sort of put that all together, the brain with the syrinx, the vocalizing muscles, we have arrived at the lyrebird, everybody. Some of you might have seen this video making the rounds on the internet or other places. Sir David Attenborough, the legendary scientist and presenter, is going to introduce this bird of Australia to you. And again, what I want you to think about when you're listening to this bird is the syrinx, the vocalizing muscles, and the brain that can interpret these.
He also, in his attempt to outsing his rivals, incorporates other sounds that he hears in the forest. That was a camera shutter. And again. And now a camera with a motor drive. And that's a car alarm. And now the sounds of foresters and their chainsaws working nearby.
Right? I mean, come on. It's almost like that can't be real, right? But again, that is the incredible abilities of how a bird sings. The syrinx, the brain working in tandem and able to do some wild things. And before I open it up to questions here, I will just add 2 things. One is that I think, Brittany, you said this at my last in-person event we did over in Heritage Park in Farmington, that this isn't unique to just a bird in Australia, like the lyrebird. The starling can do this, the European starling, which is widespread in all of North America. So even that bird, if you listen carefully, I've heard it like making some really strange sounds. And I'm like, are you imitating like the sounds of the school buses in my neighborhood? Like, I'm pretty sure you're doing that, European starling. And the second thing I'll add before I'll open it up to questions, feel free to start putting them in the chat, was a little conversation here while the hermit thrush was going on. Sounds like a Native American or indigenous wood flute music. I really like that image. And Martha was suggesting that it sounds like a composed piece of music. And I also ask those questions when I listen to birds. And this isn't a topic we're going to have time to get into today, most likely, but the idea of why birds sing. And I hear something like this hermit thrush song, and I go, that's way too detailed and musical for it to just be because of mating or territory, which is the common answers people give for why does a bird sing? Mating, territory. But perhaps there's something deeper. And there's a great book called Why Birds Sing by David Rothenberg. He's a musician and artist, and he kind of gets into this philosophical question of why does a bird sing? And can it be for more than just mating and territory? And maybe is it composing? Does it find music aesthetically enjoyable? Right. And by the way, notice how I said music for that bird. I didn't say it was just producing sound. It might be making music, which is something we usually attribute to humans, not to the animal kingdom, but perhaps, right? So I'll leave the chat open for another few seconds here. If anyone has a question, there'll be one more round to grab your last burning questions if you missed this time around. Forgot to disable annotations. Did it now. Omnipotence is amazing, everybody. Yes. All right. So let's get down to your first bird quiz, everyone. So, oh, I got a question here. Do they practice sounds? I don't believe so. I suppose you could say that when they're learning like mimicry, perhaps they are sort of refining their searings and refining sort of like what they can absorb into the repertoire. But I'm not sure if they practice in the same way that we do as humans. Brittany, do you have some insight?
I do, yeah. So I wouldn't say I know necessarily as an adult, but juveniles, right before they become adults, they'll be practicing with their parents. They'll try and imitate them. Um, maybe they'll practice with other juveniles in a big group. I mean, it really depends on the species, but typically that kind of juvenile, what we would consider kind of a teenage age in birds before they become adults. Yeah, there's a lot of practicing that they'll do whether it's from flapping to learning the bird calls. Some research has found that they say that the bird calls are something that they know automatically, but they've also found that it is also learned. And so it's something their bird calls will be more varied if they learn from their parents. And so it's just like there's all these studies of mixture of they learned it and or they already kind of innately knew it.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And by the way, everyone, this is why you keep an ornithologist in the room, not an ornithologist here. I'm a musician. So thanks for jumping in with that, Brittany. And yeah, I just learned that. That's really fascinating. And I've got my homework laid out for me now. That's going to be my next wormhole for the week. That's so cool. And it makes me think, Brittany and I both have little ones at home. And it makes me think of the way that, I sing to my little one and teach her phrases and she repeats them back to me. And so she's sort of practicing in that same way that birds are learning from their mothers, right? It's kind of cool to see that process take shape, right? And how you as the parent can influence that. And it's not necessarily encoded in the DNA, although it sounds like to some degree it is too, which is so cool. Oh my gosh. So let's get into our bird quiz now, everybody. The doors are locked, you cannot leave. So here it is. I'm going to give you an imaginary bird walk. You're going to hear a 30-second clip of sound, and you're going to hear 4 different birds around you. I'm going to give you 2 listens to this recording. And here is the only thing I do not want to see in the chat. No species names. I do not want you to tell me what these birds are specifically. I want you to describe their sounds to me. And what I want to encourage you to do is build upon what we did with that robin. So first of all, use that robin as an anchor bird. Hint, hint. and use the ideas that we talked about that are on the screen now when we analyze the robin song to help you figure out what's going on in these other birds that you're going to hear. And again, maybe keep the robin song in mind and hear how whatever birds you're about to hear are different, or sort of contrast the robin and use that in your descriptions. So for example, if the robin has these big swoops and pitches, maybe a bird doesn't necessarily have that you're about to hear, right? So 2 listens, do not tell me the species name, and throw some answers in the chat. Describe the sounds that you are hearing on this imaginary bird walk. Let's dive in here. Before I do a second run through, just know that I'm not expecting you to tell me about every sound if you don't have time to furiously type in the chat. Even just one sound that you heard, describe it in detail to me. How would you describe the sounds that you're hearing? One more listen, and then we'll sort of see what pops up in the chat. All right, so we got an answer here. Nasal sound, fuzzy, clear notes, twitter, scream. I love that scream, because yes, birds do love to scream at us, don't they? Yeah, that all falls under timbre, right? The sounds of the sounds, like almost as if what instruments are they playing? The last one, very lyrical, lots of notes and pleasant. Yes, that last verb, whatever it is, has this sort of like stream of consciousness, run-on sentence sort of thing happening, right? It just keeps going and going and going and going, compared to the robin, who sort of takes its time and stops, you know? First one, 2 pitches. Second one has lots of pitch. Third one is straight and 1 sound. Like those answers. Quick pace sounds, absolutely. One is like an ice pick in the ear. Ooh, very harsh. Yes. Those of you who know what bird it is, you're going to know exactly why. The last bird reminds me of someone talking, definitely trying to get a message across. Very interesting. The last one is smushy, 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 whooshy. Oh, I love that. Smushy, 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 whooshy. Smushy, smushy, smushy. And then we have first one like a triplet, and then 3 single notes. Awesome. Awesome. Oh, these are great answers here. So yeah, great use of your skills, everyone, that we sort of refined with the robin calls. I love seeing all the different ways you're interpreting these. So now let's really break down what you're hearing here. And yes, I am going to reveal to you what these birds are. I'm not that mean. So the black-capped chickadee. So to me, this one sounds very fricative, meaning like those types of sounds, like sort of like a something like that. And it kind of has this D on the end. So some onomatopoeia would be chickadee D, right? A lot less musical than the robin, I would say. It's more of a straight tone to it. It doesn't have a lot of inflection with its pitch, if you listen again with me. And again, that ticker tape that's flowing across my eyes, I see like, 3 individual notes, like a lot of you were saying in the chat, right? I see those notes very clearly and then a big pause, right? Next up, this should have been an easy one. The robin, right? I really wanted to include this bird again because, again, this is our anchor bird. And so, at the very least, hopefully you heard that and went, oh, that's a robin, right? And so, when you go outside, keep those anchor birds close to you and remember those sounds very clearly, right? Then the third one here. Yeah, the meanie, right? Kind of a bully in the avian kingdom, right? Blue jay is kind of like the boss of the birds around, of the feeders. Imitate red-shouldered hawks to scare the birds away, get them to drop their food. Very nasally, I saw that word used in the chat. Harsh, like an ice pick, right? We saw that one in the chat earlier. I also hear a descending pitch. It's not going eh, it's going eh. There's a falling sort of trail of pitch at the end of its call. And that can be useful for, if you can hear that, you can sort of rule out that it's not something like a starling, which in my neighborhood, they do this koki, koki. And from a distance, you might even confuse those. So the pitch on the blue jay almost always goes down. That's another way you can listen for the blue jay. And then we have this one. The house finch. And yeah, this is the sort of stream or flurry of notes, right? And it's dense. It's dense. I've spent some time slowing down recordings of house finches, and I've counted upwards of 13, 14, 15, sometimes 20 syllables. And recently, I think last week or 2 weeks ago, I actually sat down and really transcribed their song into music notation. And I started to notice these patterns where they often start the first half of their songs with the same thing, the same like 5 or 6 notes. And then there's some sort of variation at the end. So it's always this sort of like, hey, I'm going to start with this, but then I'm going to change it up. So very cool listening to finches. It's a lot of fast-paced information. My pet nickname for them is DJ Bird, because that's my terrible DJ sounds. So congratulations. You all did pass. No one said, hey, it's all a lyrebird. You missed that answer. You could have just done that and gotten it passed, but that's okay. This will come back in an altered form. So be ready for your second quiz later on, everybody. Now, before we fully get into our last subject of the day, which is birdsong and composers, I felt like this is a good time to very quickly talk for a minute about Merlin. Because for those of you who know what it is, it would have been easy to, for example, get your phone out and identify those forward birds using Merlin, right? So Merlin is an app. It's on your phones, and it's made by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. And what it does is, it does many things, but one of the things it can do is sound identification. You point your microphone on your phone at a bird, and it records that sound, turns it into a spectrogram, like we saw earlier in my presentation, and matches that visual spectrogram against other ones in its library. Now, Merlin's great. It's amazing. You should all download it, but don't let it tell you that a bird only endemic in Peru is in your backyard. That can happen, especially if you don't play with some of the deeper settings. In the app that I won't get into today. I was recently up north, and it was trying to tell me that a junco was a chipping sparrow because their songs are very similar. And mockingbirds always fool it. If anyone's on Reddit here, you can go on Reddit and see hilarious postings of people saying, yep, my Merlin showed me 5 different birds, and then figured out it was a mockingbird, because they're great mimics. They mimic other birds. So that's all to say, be careful, right? Check your work, which I'll get into in a sec, and just know that I think it's kind of fun that it screws up, because it almost shows us how limited our technology is to study these birds, and just makes their world even wilder and weirder to us, And if I could tell you one thing about Merlin, if you all choose to go download it, which you should, is that Merlin is not the birder, you are. So don't take its answer for granted. Do your research. And one of my favorite things about Merlin is that you have an army of resources at your disposal now. If you get the app, you have all these sound recordings and spectrograms to look at. So that's what you should do. Step one is recording the sound, but then you're the birder. Step two is digging in and doing research and figuring out, well, was it that sound? Let me listen to these recordings. Let me look at some spectrograms, right? So if you have a question about Merlin, save it, because I have another section coming up for questions. So I know that could be a big topic sometimes. It's something a lot of birders use nowadays. But I do want to get moving here in the sake of time to our final topic of the day, which is birdsong and composers. So it'd be impossible to recap every major development in music history alongside of birdsong history. So I'm just going to give you a few of my favorite highlights. For example, the very famous composer Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart had a pet starling. And this is a hilarious story. There's even an entire book about this bird, I believe called Mozart's Starling. And Mozart heard this bird in a pet shop singing a tune he hadn't performed yet or published yet. And so the best guess is that Mozart wandered into this pet shop a few weeks earlier and absentmindedly sang the tune to the bird, and then came back weeks later and the bird remembered the tune. And it sounded something like this. So again, imagine you're Mozart, one of the world's greatest composers that ever lived, and you hear this bird sing its own song back. Incredible, right? And so Mozart actually bought the bird, kept it for 3 or 4 years, and became so attached to it that when the bird died, he threw the funeral, including poems and eulogies and all these things for this starling, which I think is just incredible. So I think if that doesn't illustrate the strong bond between, this greatest composer or one of that's ever lived and a bird, I don't know what does, right? And no talk about birdsong and composers would be complete without this gentleman, Olivier Messiaen, a French composer, born in 1908, died in 1992, and he is by far the most well-known composer to work with birdsong. And what I really appreciate about his interpretations of birdsong is the detail. He doesn't just, for example, do one-note melodies, one note at a time for each bird that he sort of represents in his music. He combines a stack or cluster of notes to make these wild chords to really give a lot of color to the bird's song. So to illustrate that, here is a recording of an actual northern cardinal. And then I'm going to play you a recording of a work by Olivier Messiaen on solo piano where he imitates that same exact cardinal. And again, listen to how he's playing multiple notes at the same time on the piano to represent this cardinal song. Take 2. I'll do the northern cardinal again. Kind of cool, right? If we have more time, we could listen to more of his music and spend a whole lecture just on him. But I do want to move on to this, sort of coming back full circle to our hermit thrush, which I talked about closer to the beginning of our presentation. I thought it'd be neat to look at one bird through the lens of 2 different composers. We have Amy Beach on the left and Emily Doolittle on the right. Both of them incorporated hermit thrush song into their music, almost 100 years apart. And so what I want you to do is sort of listen to the similarities and the differences with how they sort of incorporated their song. Feel free to put your answer in the chat. In the sake of time, I won't open this up for a full discussion like I would love to do. But again, feel free to share something in the chat if something jumps out at you. Here's the hermit thrush again to get your ears sort of acquainted with the bird. And here's the composer Amy Beach with her piece Hermit Thrush at Morn. And then here's, I'll play the Hermit Thrush just really quickly one more time to get it back in your ear, and then we'll listen to Emily Doolittle. Now, Emily Doolittle. So again, very interesting seeing how two different composers 100 years apart interpreted the same bird with very different instruments and melodic ideas, right? And as a very quick side note, Emily Doolittle co-authored a fascinating research study into hermit thrushes along with a group of scientists and studied how their songs actually overlap very closely with human musical scales. And they sing with the overtone series, we call it, which is a very cool presentation for a totally different day, because I just wanted to briefly show you this, and then we are off to our final quiz of the evening, right? So feel free to screenshot this, take a picture with your phone really quick. These are some of my favorite examples of birdsong and music. Two that I'll just very quickly point out, Bjork, the Icelandic pop singer. She loved birds so much that for a deluxe special edition for her album, she made all these handmade flute sort of whistle wooden devices that came with the album that sound like birds. She worked with some French company. And then A Guide to the Birdsong of South America is a really neat album. It's a bunch of electronic music DJs using birdsong recordings and spinning them into electronic music, right? So I have one question in the chat. Feel free to add some more here before we jump into our final quiz of the evening. Martha says, they've got the complicated runs of the thrush, but one's in minor. Isn't the thrush in major? That is such a great question, Martha. So I studied the hermit thrush song way too much. And what's interesting is a lot of them do sing in major. They sing with the flat 7 scale degree. For anyone who loves jazz music, that's a very common thing they use in jazz music, this flat 7. I'm getting very music theory-y here. But I've also listened to hermit thrush songs that sound more minor or even diminished, we call it. It's a very special kind of crunchy chord. So to answer your question, Martha, they're kind of all over the map. And depending on what hermit thrush you listen to and, you know, what particular song they're singing at the time, you can sometimes hear major, minor, diminished, but they tend to skew towards major with a flat 7. That's kind of what the scientists studying the hermit thrush have found. So great ears, by the way, Martha. Really great ears over there. We'll have to chat sometime about some fun musical things. So very much agree, Martha. How about we take our final quiz, everybody? My daughter's over here. I just gotta blow her a quick kiss. She's off to bed. For our final quiz of the evening, if you have a minute to stick around, I know we're almost over time here. We are over time. I've given you a tricky one. This is the body doubles. So I've taken the same 4 birds that I quizzed you on in the first quiz, but now they're all singing different variations of their song. And so see if you can try to guess which goes with which. Okay. So here is number 1. Here's number 2. Here's number 3. And here's number 4. Tricky, no? And again, I use this quiz to illustrate this point that birdsong is really varied, even within the same species. So you have to be careful when you hear a bird call and go, "Oh, what species is that? Oh, I know that bird." Wow. So I'll play them all one more time. And again, the birds on the left, 1, 2, 3, 4, match one of the birds on the right. Feel free to throw your answer in the chat, and then I will show the answers after I get through number 4. Here's number 1 again. Two. Three. And 4. Okay, we have some great answers in the chat here. So let's see how you did on your final quiz of the evening. So the answers are as follows. Number 1, play. Please play. No. I'll make the sound. It went shia, shia, shia. That's a blue jay. Oh, there it is. Thank you, blue jay. Now you play it, blue jay, right? This is the creepy swing set music, or the hollow metal bat sound, as I like to call it. Number 2 is our robin. At our in-person event in Farmington Hills recently, the crowd all agreed that this is an angry robin, which is 100% correct. Number 3 is our chickadee. Very different from its other call, right? The chickadee dee dee dee. This one's a lot more musical and high pitched. And then, as soon as Mr. Chickadee stops, our robin, or I'm sorry, our finch. And this one, I think the onomatopoeia I've seen before is Z-up. Z-up. So very different from its other call, right? So the world of birdsong is wild and diverse, and you can be fooled. So I just wanted to show you this to say, watch out, right? And for those of you who did really well in this quiz, I'm sad I couldn't have time to give you my impossible quiz. So until next time is all I will say to you, because, ooh, it's a doozy. Some of you did almost too good on this one. All right, so feel free to ask a question in the chat. I can stick around for an extra second if you can, Brittany. I'm not sure if you can.
Yeah, we do have one question I'll go ahead and answer. Thank you, Melanie. She says, what can we, where can we watch this again? So it is being recorded. I will aim to get this posted to our YouTube page and our website here either by the end of this week, if not early next week. And so it will be shared through our website. But I'll also email all of the attendees if you registered directly. So that way it'll be through Eventbrite and we'll send that link. So that way maybe you missed part of the beginning or you just want to rewatch. You're more than welcome to, and we'll have that link shared sometime within the next week or two. So I did want to mention the chickadee. I don't know if anyone heard it. It's always a fun little comparison, but it sounds like it's saying cheeseburger. It's what a lot of people say. And then we have a few other comments. So blue jay bat sound, I think of it as sonar or radar sound. So glad I found this event. Thank you. We're glad you could join us. Lots of thank yous. Could you tell us why birds sing, Andy?
Yes, I just dropped a link into the chat. It's through Amazon. Go to your local bookstore, go to your independent bookstore, plug for them. I love Literati in Ann Arbor. Order it through them. Please don't order it through Amazon. It's Why Birds Sing, A Journey into the Mystery of Birdsong by David Rothenberg. Really fantastic book. Again, he's an artist. He's a musician who talks to a lot of scientists and sort of goads them into going deeper into that question of why birds sing. And he sometimes makes the scientists bristle a little bit because they're very strict about following their data, but he as an artist gets to kind of poke at different sorts of questions. A really fun read, really fun read. So highly recommend you check that out. Yeah.
We have some more comments. I said, Andy, this was really interesting. I knew it would be since you're so knowledgeable. We have fun and interesting webinar. Thanks to Andy and Detroit Bird Alliance. Hope you can do another webinar, Andy. And we'd love, if you have another idea, we'd love to put something together. Great job. This was great. I hope we have bird songs too. So we just let everyone know. So we have a few things coming up that we're going to be working with Andy on. So we do have a field trip coming up this fall. So if you want to attend in person and have a chance to learn some different types of birds, as well as go on a walk with Andy, that'll be coming up this fall. We also have a couple of other events, which you'll have to possibly join if you want to join as a member, $30 a year. You get early notification about upcoming events. We have some things in the works that we haven't quite started advertising. But if you become a member, you'll be able to learn about that pretty quickly. Or you can follow us on social media. There's always different options, but you can also check out our website, DetroitBirdAlliance.org, our events page. We'll post all of our events coming up through that as well. And so multiple ways you can learn about what we're doing and see what else we're going to be doing with Andy. And then Cindy said, where can we watch more, Andy?
I don't know if anyone really wants that because I know I don't want that. But again, all the information that Brittany just shared, I'll be doing some in-person events through the Detroit Bird Alliance. Other than that, I'm not a hard person to find. Jarema is a very unique last name. So if you punch in Andy Jarema on the internet, I come up very quickly. So feel free to find me there. Find me on the internet, andyjarema.com if you want to say hello.
Yeah, he has a website. You can check out what he's been up to. But otherwise, it's a little over 10 after. Thanks everyone for joining us. We're really happy to have you. And we look forward to having you join us for future events and webinars. So if you have any other questions, feel free to email us and we will also connect them to Andy if you want to. But otherwise, have a wonderful night and good night.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for coming. Go listen to a bird.
Thank you for everything. This was awesome.
Hey, thanks for coming. Appreciate it. Oh, this is fun.